Welcome back to the College Basketball Bracket Science Podcast, your encyclopedia for the college basketball season. We got a fun episode today. We're going to talk some bracketology as we are usually doing at this time of the year. We're also going to talk about some of the results. Saturday was about as entertaining as we've seen all year. We saw potentially the game of the year between Houston and Kansas. We saw the number one team in the nation get back Johni Broome and be tested even at home. We saw other ranked teams continue to fall. We had some decent games on Sunday, and then last night on Big Monday, my goodness, we saw the most unbelievable shot we've seen all year so far. So we're going to talk about that along with Duke being tested. We'll talk about those real quick, but then the main heart of the show today is going to be that bracketology. We got some matchups today. New bracketology graphic, not just the seed list. We got the actual matchups. So kind of fun to see who might be matching up with who might be on upset watch. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of the rankings that came out. The AP poll came out. We'll talk about that briefly. Our rankings, which are much better than the AP poll, of course, but we'll talk about that quickly. Then, of course, the games to watch this week with the opening KenPom betting lines. We'll be ad-free once again today, so be sure to like and subscribe. Follow us on social media at Bracket Science with 2 S's. That's TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. Go check it out. Let's dive right into the results. Now, we're going to go through Thursday through Monday. We're only going to talk about the games outside of Saturday and that big Monday game for half a second for just about all of them. Maryland wins at number 17 Illinois 91-70. Huge win for Maryland's resume in that one. Memphis holds off Wichita State. No surprise there. A couple WCC games. Santa Clara beats Washington State. St. Mary's beats San Francisco. No surprise in either one of those. What was a little surprising, UC Irvine loses at UC Riverside. So for those who don't know, UC Irvine has probably been the best mid-major, outside of the Memphis and Gonzaga and St. Mary's, who barely even qualify as mid-majors. UC Irvine is one of the best, mid-majors in the country, but they lose at UC Riverside. Riverside been playing well. Omaha beats St. Thomas in a Summit League action. Summit League, these were the last 2 undefeated teams in the Summit League. Now Omaha, the only undefeated team in the Summit. UNC Wilmington wins at Charleston. Maybe the 2 best teams in the CAA, if I say so myself. And then Louisiana Tech beats Western Kentucky. Nothing too important there. On Friday, moving on to Friday, Villanova loses at Marquette. Villanova is really struggling right now. They're falling off of the bubble. Number 21, Michigan lost at number 11, Purdue, 91-64. Michigan is having some serious problems right now. We'll talk about them here in a second. They did pick up a win, but they're falling off a little bit as of late. Penn State lost at Iowa in a heartbreaker, rough week for Penn State. St. Bonaventure lost at VCU. Remember, we talked about that game on the last podcast. That had opportunity to be a fun one. VCU is really good. Watch out for VCU come March. UCLA won at Washington. No surprise there. And then the other games we're not even going to discuss. Nothing real important. Dayton beats St. Joe's. Nothing too special. Let's talk about Saturday. Saturday's the day we want to talk about. We have 24 games on this graphic for those watching on YouTube, but we're not going to talk about all of them. We'll just talk about some of the important ones. Number 6, Tennessee traveled to number 1, Auburn. Auburn gets Johni Broome back. Auburn holds them off 53-51. What an impressive game by both teams, in my opinion. Sometimes the best teams in the country, like the Auburns, Tennessee's in that boat. When you win ugly, it says something about your team. That's kind of what I took away from this Auburn game. But I left just impressed with Tennessee as well. Tennessee let Auburn play into the strategy that they wanted. They wanted this to be a low-scoring, just bloodbath, and that's what it turned out to be. Auburn still gets the job done. Wins ugly. Good for them. Number 2, Duke went to Wake Forest, beat them 63-56. Duke led pretty big at the half. Wake Forest fought all the way back, got the lead, but their offense is just, it stalls at some points, and then Cooper Flagg basically just took over. But Wake Forest, tough loss there, big opportunity, had it, and just the offense just isn't there. Number 3, Iowa State went to Arizona State and beat them 76-61. The game was so much closer than this. The game ended at a 12.5-point line, Iowa State being favorites. Arizona State led for a while, even late in the second half, and then Iowa State just took over and ended up winning. LSU lost at number 4, Alabama. No surprise, 80-73, but the surprise was Mark Sears benched by Nate Oates in the second half in this game. Mark Sears had 0 points. He hasn't been playing great this year. Mark Sears is one of the not just best players in the country, but one of, just the role model kind of guys that college basketball really relies on. He's a big name. He's a big brand himself. This says something to me about the relationship that Nate Oates and Mark Sears have. If you can bench he was the preseason player of the year at CBS Sports, and you bench him midway through the first half, or at the end of the first half, Alabama came out and played better without him in the second half. Alabama, it was a tight game all the way through, and then they benched him and they started winning. That says something about Alabama's depth. That says something. I know a lot of people aren't going to like it because Mark Sears he's probably getting paid upwards of $1 million to play at Alabama. I don't know the exact number, and I know Mark Sears' mom came out publicly and was like, although I disagree with it, I trust Nate Oates and the staff, and it's just like, it's kind of, not a lot of coaches have the guts to do that, and I kind of respect Nate Oates for doing that because, quite frankly, Mark Sears is awesome, but when he's not playing well, they have other options that can be just as good. So that's the story in that one. Alabama gets the win. Georgia traveled to number 5 Florida. I thought they were going to keep this one close. Mike White going back to his old school. It was not. 89-59. Georgia really struggling right now. Florida, for not including in not talking about this game outside of the game, but Todd Golden's Title IX accusation has been dropped. They said there was no evidence found. So Florida looking good, playing good on the court, beating cases off the court. They're a good team. Moving on, the game of potentially the year. Number 7 Houston goes to Allen Fieldhouse and beats number 12 Kansas 92-86 in double overtime. They were down 6. It was just incredible. DeJuan Harris is at the line. Houston's down 6. DeJuan Harris, at this point, KenPom gave Kansas a 99.6 chance to win this game. Up 6, DeJuan Harris at the free throw line, 18 seconds left. He misses them both. Houston comes down. Emmanuel Sharp knocks down a huge, huge 3 to cut it to 3. Zeke Mayo turns it over on the inbound. Malik Wilson, who had a underappreciated, no one's talking about it. They're talking about how this was a crazy come up. Malik Wilson was awesome in this game. He knocks down a 3 to tie it, goes into double overtime, and Kansas, just did not have a chance in double overtime after that just debacle. Houston gets the win. Houston gets that win that is like, all right, yeah, they're a 2 seed. We'll talk about them here in a bit in bracketology. Michigan State goes to Rutgers and beats them 81-74. Michigan State up in the top 10 of the country. Michigan State. Quick little preview. Our next podcast is going to be on Coaches of the Year. Tom Izzo, right in that conversation. Another one in that conversation, Mark Pope at number 9 Kentucky, although they did lose at Vanderbilt, who Mark Byington is in that conversation. Vanderbilt picks up a huge win, second win over a top 10 team in a row at home. They beat Tennessee, now they beat Kentucky, 74-69. Good for Mark Byington's squad. Now that Houston-Kansas game was crazy. This game was crazy as well. Number 13 Texas A&M against a rival at Texas. Texas A&M led by 22 in the second half. Texas fights all the way back and wins 70-69. Total collapse by Buzz Williams and Texas A&M. Tremont Mark hit a I'm better than you, lengthy arms over top layup at the last second. Ends up giving them the win. Wade Taylor shot like a half quarter that, man, it looked good for a while. But Texas gets the win there. Texas moves safely into the tournament for now, not too far. Rodney Terry, I know, saw some people on social media, it was kind of a odd little scene, Texas fights back and wins, and Rodney Terry's like sticking his tongue out at through the handshake line. I don't know if it was at the fans. It was kind of weird, and a lot of people are just like, congrats, you're sub 500 in the SEC, but they get a win, and they needed the win bad, but it's still Texas. You should be ranked. I'm not in on Rodney Terry. I like what they have with the team. I just think they'll take them as far as Rodney Terry can take them, and to me, that's like the round of 32, but we'll see. Number 14, Mississippi State won a overtime battle at South Carolina, 65-60. Good win for Mississippi State, who had been fading a little bit. Number 15, Oregon is coming back to earth. They lose at Minnesota. Good for Ben Johnson and Minnesota. They're starting to win some games. They were just write them in as last place in the Big Ten. They're doing all right. They got 3 Big Ten wins now. A ranked win here. They beat Michigan earlier. Looking pretty good. Good for them. I like to see a team with not as much NIL money, and I like to see Dawson Garcia succeed because he's really underappreciated, just kind of hiding in the shadows of Minnesota. But Oregon, the computer numbers don't add up with their their quadrant wins, 8 quadrant 1 wins. Everyone's like, yeah, I don't think they're that good. Yeah, it's starting to kind of show. Number 16, Ole Miss went to number 22, Missouri, and got beat 75-83. Missouri and Dennis Gates having a great year. What a rebound year. Great job by Dennis Gates there. Number 19, UConn loses at Xavier. Xavier picks up the win that they needed, 76-72. Remember, Xavier went to Marquette and beat them. They should have won at St. John's. They blew a big lead late in the second half, and then you beat UConn. Those are probably your top 3 teams in the Big East. They don't went 3-0, but 2-1. I think you take that right now. They're in the bubble conversation right now. UConn, not playing so well. Number 23, West Virginia went to Kansas State and got drilled 73-60. Kansas State stinks. West Virginia is up and down. West Virginia is safely in the tournament field right now, but they're a team I would not trust come March Madness. I could see them making a run. I could also see them losing as a 6 seed to an 11 seed by 20, quite frankly. Oklahoma goes to Arkansas and beats them 65-62. Arkansas led late in the game, and then it's Arkansas season. They lose this one. It's not looking too fantastic for the Razorbacks this March. San Diego State went to Nevada, had no issues. Nevada really stinks right now. They're highly ranked in a lot of computers because they were supposed to be good this year. They're not. 69-50. San Diego State takes care of business. The most eye-raising result, maybe second most eye-raising result, is we'll talk about North Carolina here in a little bit. But Cincinnati goes to BYU and just gets drilled, absolutely drilled, 80-52, not close. Cincinnati cannot score. BYU, good win there. New Mexico survives UNLV thanks to some late missed free throws, but New Mexico gets the job done 75-73. Baylor, no problems with Utah. Oregon State beats Santa Clara. St. Mary's beats Washington State on the road. Watch out for St. Mary's. They're really good, and no one's really talking about them. The other eye-opening one, 102-96. North Carolina beats Boston College at home. Lucky to even get it to overtime as this game went into North Carolina, and then they won in overtime, but man, Boston College is not good. North Carolina really struggling. If they lose that game, wow, that would have been ugly for Hubert Davis. Georgetown and Ed Cooley lose at Providence again for the second straight year, 68-78. And then how about Akron? How about the Zips? Had to throw one mid-major game on here. The 2 undefeated teams in the MAC was Akron and Miami of Ohio. Akron just destroyed them, 102-75. Let's talk about Sunday real quick here. Northwestern goes to number 17 Illinois, gets beat 83-74. The game wasn't even that close. It was a blowout. Another blowout. Number 18 Wisconsin blows out Nebraska. What has happened in Nebraska? They have fallen off like crazy. Wisconsin wins 83-55. Memphis and UAB are supposed to be your top 2 teams in the American. It's now Memphis and North Texas, but coming into the season, it was supposed to be UAB and Memphis. Memphis just killed them at home, 102-77. And then Maryland goes to Indiana and beats them thanks to a last-second shot by Rodney Rice, 79-78. It's just ugly for Indiana fans. All right, the only other day we're going to talk about is Monday real quick because we just got to talk about that Iowa State-Arizona game. Iowa State goes to Arizona, leads 71-68. They make, or 70-68, they make a free throw, turns it 71-68. Caleb Love hits just heave from beyond half court. Unbelievable. One of the most unbelievable shots I can remember in all of college basketball the place just, it's like, you don't make those shots. You don't make half quarters. You don't make 30-footers to tie at the buzzer. He made it from, it looked like 50 feet. I'm not sure the exact stat, but it was nuts. And then after that, it was just all Caleb Love in overtime. I am so sorry to Iowa State bettors. That is about as bad of a beat as you can get. Remember, this kind of reminded me of that beat. Arizona at home against Arizona State. It was 2 years ago maybe, where Arizona State knocked down the beyond half-court shot to win at the buzzer. Well, Arizona fans get them back here with a good one there. 86-75, the final score ended up. Number 2, Duke defeated NC State 74-64. This was a close one. NC State is not good, but they really came in and tested Duke. They play Duke well every year. Obviously, they kind of dominated them last year. But Duke, Cooper Flagg, just the story. He's awesome. And then strange stuff at the end of the game with Malawach just like throwing up on the court, and then someone, I guess, passed out in the Cameron Crazy student section. Well, hopefully everyone's all right, but that was just kind of weird. Was it too hot in the gym or what? I heard that girl who passed out's doing good, so that's good news. But weird stuff kind of overshadowed the fact that Cooper Flagg was just awesome in the game, and he is fantastic, and he's probably going to be your player of the year in college basketball this year. Penn State led late at Michigan, but Michigan fought back, and Trey Donaldson carried them to a victory, 76-72. Moving on, Ohio State just dominated Iowa. I thought they were going to get in this year. They're not. They're not looking too good. They're falling off. 82-65. It was a blowout. UCLA goes to USC, 82-76, and wins in a Big Ten showdown. McNeese survived Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and then just the other two on the graphic, just some mid-major games. Little Rock, one of the favorites to win the OVC. They lost to EIU, whatever that even stands for. I think it's Eastern Illinois or Eastern Indiana or something. No idea, but you shouldn't lose to them. And then South Alabama loses to Louisiana Monroe, 77-66. Let's talk about the AP poll that was just released. Auburn's still number 1, Duke's number 2, Iowa State's number 3. Alabama's 4, Florida's 5, Houston is up to 6, Michigan State's up to 7, Tennessee dropped to 8. I'm not a big fan of dropping Tennessee. We'll talk about them here when we get into our rankings. Number 9 is Marquette. Number 10 is Purdue. Kansas dropped out of the top 10 to 11, or were they already out of? Yeah, they were 12th. They dropped to 11, or actually moved up to 11, I guess. Kentucky drops out of the top 10 to 12. Texas A&M's 13, Mississippi State 14. Who's better, Texas A&M or Mississippi State? These two teams are very similar in my opinion. 15, St. John's, 16, Oregon, 17, Wisconsin, 18, Illinois, 19, Memphis, 20, Missouri, 21, Louisville. They're moving up. Texas Tech enters the rankings at 22. They're really good. Watch out for Texas Tech as well. 23, Ole Miss. 24, Vanderbilt. Yes, Vanderbilt is ranked, and for some reason, UConn is still ranked. Next, we're going to dive into our ranking. Alrighty, the top 5 in our rankings are the exact same as the AP poll. Auburn at number 1, Duke 2, Iowa State 3. Iowa State's record was 17-2, as you can see on this graphic, now 17-3. I still think I will keep them at number 3, Alabama at 4, Florida at 5. I keep Tennessee at 6. Like I said, thought that they were going to get the job done against number 1 Auburn, the best team in the country, at Auburn. I'm not moving them down. I'm not penalizing them for playing a great game there. I keep them at number 6. Houston at number 7. You want to flip the 2 right there. That's fine. Michigan State at 8. Marquette at 9. Purdue 10. Kentucky 11. Texas A&M 12. Kansas 13. And the team I'm highest on that the AP poll is not is Wisconsin. Wisconsin, I think, has some serious Final Four upside. Watch out for the Badgers. 15. Mississippi State, St. John's, Memphis, Missouri, Ole Miss, Texas Tech, Illinois, down at 21. Now, I had Arizona ranked even before that game yesterday at 22. Probably up a couple spots maybe, but yeah, probably jumping ahead of Illinois and Texas Tech. Even though they did lose at Texas Tech by 16, but I don't really factor in, away losses. Nothing too detrimental there. 23, Oregon, 24, Utah State, 25, Louisville, 26, Clemson, 27, Vanderbilt, 28, Michigan, and 29, St. Mary's, 30, Maryland. Strongly considered. I dropped UConn. Baylor also in that conversation. Creighton been playing well. UCLA playing well. Gonzaga, New Mexico, and West Virginia all kind of fell off a little bit in terms of where I had them ranked at some point. But New Mexico's been playing great, but still just no huge wins. So that's it for the rankings. Let's dive into the meat of the show. Let's talk about the bracketology. So I got the graphic pulled up. You can see the new graphic, looks pretty good on here. So bear in mind, it's normally you would think you just go left to right at first and then right to left and left to right. There are aspects that like a 2 seed and a 3 seed they don't want to be in the same conference for March Madness guidelines. You might run into some issues this year because the SEC is so good that you can't just penalize them because they're in the SEC and all the teams are so good. So you might see a 2 seed play a 3 seed, but in this case we were able to stay away from that. But so if you see this is not actually in the exact order. Now the 1 seeds are, because they're the 1 seeds, but the 2 seeds, actually I have Houston behind Florida in terms of overall seeds. So Houston 7th, Florida 6th, but it's just how it adds up because in terms of the just how the bracket unfolded, that's where they end up. So don't question that when it comes to overall seeding. But the 1 seeds, Auburn, Duke, Alabama as your 3rd 1 seed now, and Iowa State still as a 1 seed, the 4th 1 seed. Going down, Tennessee, Houston, Florida, Purdue as the 2 seeds. We'll talk about the protected seeds, and then we'll get into some of the actual matchups that we would see. 3 seeds, Texas A&M, Kentucky, Marquette, Michigan State, and then the 4 seeds, Oregon, Kansas, Mississippi State, and Illinois. So let's go back up to the top. Let's go region by region, starting with the South region. Auburn taking on the winner of Central Connecticut State and Morehead State in a play-in game. Auburn, your number 1 overall seed, would have to play the winner, and it just kind of drew this way. It would kind of a tough draw strictly because of history, but the two teams really haven't performed as well as any better than the other 8 or 9 seeds. UConn taking on Gonzaga. That would be a tremendous matchup. I still have Gonzaga winning the WCC. The asterisk on this graphic does mean that they are the automatic qualifier from the conference, but it's kind of just it's just predicting. Like, Gonzaga's not in first in WCC, but I still think they're the best team. They have the best resume. I gave it to Gonzaga, but like with the Big 12, for example, I gave it to Houston. It's just all basically prediction. Things are bound to change. So UConn taking on Gonzaga, who would play Auburn. 5 seed Memphis taking on Yale. Yale as the 12 seed out of the Ivy League. 2 automatic qualifiers there. 4 seed Illinois taking on 13 seeded Arkansas State. Arkansas State beat Memphis, so say Arkansas State beats Illinois, and Memphis beats Yale. Have a nice little rematch in that one. This is a fun one. 6 seeded Michigan taking on 11 seeded New Mexico would be taking place there. 3 seeded Texas A&M taking on 14 seeded UNC Wilmington. 7 seeded Texas Tech taking on 10 seeded Texas. And then 2 seeded Purdue taking on North Dakota State, the automatic qualifier out of the Summit League there. So, start thinking in your head who you think would win some of these games. Obviously, it's all going to change, but this is about where we stand right now. This was one of the easier bracketology to fill out in terms of seeding and stuff like that. It kind of just flowed smoothly in terms of resume and overall body of work. Moving on to the East, the number 1 seed would be Duke taking on Norfolk State. Norfolk State as a 16 seed, not a play-in game, just getting a berth into the field of 64. In the 8-9 game, Vanderbilt taking on Baylor, 2 Southern schools there. Yes, Baylor down at a 9 seed right now. Vanderbilt up to an 8 seed. Baylor, they're in need of some big wins. Haven't done anything too detrimental, but still not the greatest resume ever. 5 seeded Wisconsin as they were last year, yet I think this Wisconsin team is much better than last year. We saw A.J. Storr be the best player in that Wisconsin team. We're seeing what he's doing at Kansas, and it is ugly. McNeese as a 12 seed, just as they were last year, so similar seeds there. 4 seed Mississippi State taking on 13 seeded Samford out of the SoCon. That would be a popular upset pick. I don't think it would happen, but it would be a popular upset pick. 6 seeded Utah State. In the first 4 game, we have Pitt taking on Ohio State, 2 teams that played each other earlier this year, so they try and avoid that as much as possible, but sometimes it just happens. Pitt and Ohio State as a first 4 game to play Utah State, the winner of the Mountain West, in my opinion. 3 seeded Kentucky taking on 14 seeded High Point. Now, I say this every time, but these are predicting all, the best teams in the conference, basically, which is not going to happen come March. So if you see High Point as a 14 seed, or even we'll have Grand Canyon as a 14 seed, that's probably not going to happen. That's saying all the favorites ahead of them win the conference. So you're probably looking at more of like a 13 seed right now, because that would suck if you're Kentucky and you have to draw High Point as a 14 seed. But they'll move up. They will move up. So don't be a drop to a 4 seed if you're Kentucky, and you might have to play 13 seeded High Point or Grand Canyon. That's not fun. Next up in the 7-10 game, 7 seeded St. John's taking on 10 seeded San Diego State. San Diego State still in the tournament right now. St. John's looking good as ever. These 7 seeds are scary. 2 seeded Florida taking on 15 seeded Cleveland State out of the Horizon. Cleveland State is absolutely rolling right now in the Horizon League. They're kind of running through that conference, but I'm still not the highest rated in the computers, but they're looking good. Moving on to the Midwest, we already mentioned Alabama is the 1 seed taking on Quinnipiac as a automatic qualifier. And in the 8-9 game, we got West Virginia as the 8 seed taking on Creighton as the 9 seed. That would be a fun one. An old Big East team, new Big East team. Darian DeVries and Greg McDermott, kind of similar coaching styles. That'd be a fun one to watch. 5 seeded Louisville taking on 12 seeded VCU. I think this is pretty much the worst case for Louisville. 12 seeds, I would not want to face VCU. They might end up an 11 seed. I would rather play McNeese or Yale than VCU. 4 seeded Kansas taking on 13 seeded Akron, the automatic qualifier out of the MAC. Akron, as we just mentioned, beat Miami and are in sole possession of first place in the conference, and they're rolling right now. 6 seeded Missouri taking on 11 seeded UC Irvine, the automatic qualifier out of the Big West, even though they just lost at UC Riverside. UC Irvine, a very scary team, 43rd in the net right now. Missouri, If they finish the season at a 6 seed, what a job by Dennis Gates. 3-seeded Marquette as the automatic qualifier out of the Big East, taking on Grand Canyon. Just like Kentucky, not one you want to face out of the WAC. We know how good they can be, but they have been struggling. Grand Canyon, Utah Valley, one of those two teams, pretty scary. Fun 7-10 game, Maryland as the 7 seed, taking on Oklahoma as the 10 seed. This one is one that I would lose sleep over at night, who to take. I think Oklahoma's a little bit underrated, believe it or not. I know they got up high ranked in the country, and everyone's like, I think they're overrated. I think they're underrated now. I think they're a good basketball team, got some serious potential. Their wins above bubble stat is fantastic. They won the battle for Atlantis. Maryland is up and down. They've been playing great as of late, as we mentioned, just went and drilled Illinois, but they also lost to Washington. They also lost to Northwestern. They also, lost at home to Marquette. Not saying that's a bad loss at home to Marquette, but if you want to be truly elite, Maryland, we'll see. We will see. And 2-seeded the automatic qualifier out of the Big 12. Houston taking on Bryant. I think Houston would roll through Bryant, would roll through Maryland/Oklahoma, and then would roll through Marquette or Missouri, quite frankly. So pretty easy draw in this case for Houston, but Marquette, no pushover. And in the West, we mentioned number 1 seed Iowa State would take on the winner of Colgate and Southern. Both teams kind of the powerhouses in their own respective conferences. In the 8-9 game, have Clemson taking on Georgia. Georgia fading a little bit, still hanging on. They're still in the single-digit seeds, but barely. Clemson starting to climb. They're looking like a top 3 team in the ACC. And then Ole Miss as the 5 seed in the West, taking on the winner of UCF and North Carolina as the last team in our bracket right now. There is a clear gap between North Carolina and the first team out, which we'll talk about when we get to our bubble watch. But I know people aren't going to like seeing North Carolina in there. They still have a resume that has them in the tournament right now in terms of the stats. The eye test is not there. So if they lose another one, they're hanging on, but there is a gap. We'll talk about it here in a second. 4-seeded Oregon taking on 13-seeded Lipscomb, the winner of the ASUN, projected winner of the ASUN. 6-seeded Arizona, that's a team I would not want to face. Another team I would not want to face, 11-seeded Drake out of the Missouri Valley. Some people will have Bradley. I still have Drake. They have a better resume. Drake in serious consideration for an at-large berth as well. 3-seeded Michigan State winning the Big Ten, taking on 14-seeded Middle Tennessee State out of the Conference USA, excuse me. 7-seeded UCLA taking on 10-seeded St. Mary's, a fun West Coast matchup in that one. And then 2-seeded Tennessee taking on 15-seeded Northern Colorado, excuse me. So this is the full graphic. It's just kind of fun to see what some matchups might look like. We haven't done this yet this year, so hopefully you enjoyed that little graphic. Let's move on to the bubble watch. Let's talk about the last 4 byes, first 4 teams, first 4 out, and then next 4 out. And then we also have some just some considered on here that are close. Last 4 byes, as mentioned, Oklahoma, they're still in their 10 seed. Texas as a 10 seed, San Diego State as a 10 seed, and New Mexico as an 11 seed. The first 4, Pitt safely in, taking on Ohio State as that 11 seed game. And then in the 12 seed game, I have UCF and North Carolina as the last team in. First 4 out, Arizona State. There is a gap in resumes from North Carolina to Arizona State. If you put the numbers and crunch it in, there's a significant gap. And then Wake Forest as the second team out. Indiana as the third team out. Indiana, I thought they were going to be, 6 to 8 teams out still in terms of resume. Third team out. Northwestern, the 4th team out. SMU, 5th team out. Xavier up to the 6th team out. Remember, if they'd have won that game at St. John's, you're probably looking at bumping North Carolina down to a first 4 out and Xavier in. BYU as the next 4 as the 7th team out, and Cincinnati as the 8th team out. Now, I did just throw some other ones in consideration. North Texas out of the AAC, I have as the 9th team out. Nice program there, just barely out there. Nebraska as the 10th team out. Arkansas, 11th team out. Bradley, 12th team out. And Penn State, your 13th team out. That's the entire bracketology outlook. Next, let's dive into the games to watch for this week. Starting tonight on Tuesday, we got a big day ahead of us. Starting at 6:30 on FS1, number 15, St. John's travels to Georgetown. St. John's favored by 4 in that game. Next up, we have number 12 Kentucky traveling to number 8 Tennessee, not number 6 Tennessee. That is a misprint. My bad. Tennessee's favored by 9 in that game. In fact, I think the line even moved up to 10.5. That feels like a lot of points. 7 o'clock on ESPN. Can Kentucky, keep it close on the road? We'll see. 7 o'clock on the ACC network. Wake Forest needs a win. Need a win bad, taking on number 21 Louisville. Louisville favored by 9 in that game. At 8 o'clock on ESPN Plus, UCF. We mentioned the second to last team in our tournament right now, travels to Allen Fieldhouse, take on number 11 Kansas. Kansas favored by 13.5 in that one. Remember, Kansas went to UCF and beat them by over 50 earlier in the year, so keep an eye on that one. 9 o'clock on the SEC Network, Oklahoma travels to number 13 Texas A&M. Texas A&M favored by 8 in that one. At 9 o'clock on ESPN, North Carolina travels to Pitt. Both teams in our first 4. Both teams really need this one. Both teams really been struggling as of late. Someone's got to win. We'll see. Pitt favored by 3.5. At 9 o'clock on ESPN2, Baylor travels to BYU. BYU favored by 3.5 in that one. BYU has a good opportunity here to pick up a quad 1 win. At 11 o'clock on ESPN2, Oregon State beat Gonzaga earlier in the year, but they go to Gonzaga this time. Gonzaga favored by 14.5. Feels like a lot of points, but we'll see. 11 o'clock ESPN2. Moving on to Wednesday, number 17 Wisconsin travels to Maryland. Maryland favored by 3 at home in that one on the Big Ten Network. Also at 7 o'clock on ESPN Plus, number 6 Houston travels to West Virginia. West Virginia is underdogs by 8 points in this one. Houston favored by 8 on the road. At 7 o'clock on ESPN2, TCU travels to Texas Tech. Texas Tech favored by 15 in this one. Texas Tech, don't drop this one. 7 o'clock, SEC Network, number 1 team in the land, Auburn travels to LSU. Not an automatic game here. LSU not as bad as you think. Auburn is favored by 13 on the road, though, at 8 o'clock on FS1. Xavier travels to Creighton. Huge opportunity for Xavier here. Creighton safely in the field. Xavier's not. Huge opportunity. Creighton only favored by 6 via Ken Pom at home. Big spot for both teams. At 9 o'clock on ESPNU. St. Mary's travels to Santa Clara. As mentioned, St. Mary's flying under the radar. Santa Clara also, they're not really flying under the radar, though. People know how good Santa Clara is. St. Mary's is favored by 3 on the road, though. At 9 o'clock on ESPN2, Texas tries to stay hot, traveling to number 23, Ole Miss. Ole Miss favored by 6 in that game. At 9 o'clock on the SEC Network, number 4, Alabama travels to number 14, Mississippi State. Mississippi State favored by 1 in that one. If Alabama picks up a win there, it'll be close to pushing them to the number 2 overall seed. Duke just doesn't have that many opportunities to pick up quadrant wins, but we'll see how much the numbers would change in terms of the metrics as well. Moving on to Thursday, 2 teams that I think are very similar. Ohio State travels to Penn State at 6:30 on FS1. Penn State is favored by 1 in that one at home. At 8:30 on FS1, number 18, Illinois travels to Nebraska. Nebraska, who is in desperate need of a win. Illinois also dropped a few as of late. Illinois is favored by 4 on the road. At 9 o'clock on ESPN Plus, this will be a very high under-the-radar game, but wanted to throw it in there. Mentioned Cleveland State has absolutely been rolling. Purdue-Fort Wayne is the best team in the net in the Horizon League. They play each other at Purdue-Fort Wayne, 9 o'clock ESPN Plus. Fort Wayne is favored by 4 in that one. At 10:30 on FS1, number 16 Oregon travels to UCLA. UCLA favored by 3. These teams played earlier in the year. UCLA won at Oregon. Now UCLA only favored by 3. We'll see. We'll see about that one. Moving on to Friday, a few mid-major games and then one big rivalry game. At 5 o'clock on ESPN Plus, your 2 best teams in the Ivy League. Yale travels to Princeton. Yale favored by 3 on the road. At 7 o'clock on CBS Sports Network. Akron, who we talked about, who has been rolling, travels to Kent State. This is a huge rivalry for those who do not know. 7 o'clock, CBS Sports Network. Akron favored by 1 on the road. Always a great environment in that game. At 7 o'clock on ESPN2, Dayton, who is in desperate need of a win. They're probably, 13 teams out for me right now. Travel to St. Louis. St. Louis is, starting to finally figure some stuff out under Coach Josh Schertz, but Dayton favored by 1 on the road. And then at 8 o'clock on Fox, a huge rivalry game. Indiana, the struggling Hoosiers, travel to Mackey against number 10 Purdue. Purdue favored by 12 via Ken Pom. That's going to do it for the show today. Thanks for everyone who stuck with us here. Hopefully you enjoyed some talk about bracketology with some matchups, some rankings, the games to watch. It's going to be a fun week, and the weekend is even better. This might be the best weekend we've had all year, so be sure to hit the like and subscribe and hit the post notifications so you know when we come up. We'll talk a lot about the preview, or we'll preview a lot of the weekend games coming up. So stay tuned. We'll talk to you again real soon. Enjoy the hoops. Take care.